the early morning mist of a medieval shoreline, the sound of wood against wood echoed across the harbor. There were no blueprints spread across tables, no standardized measurements, no machines to lift massive beams with ease. Yet from these rough shipyards emerged vessels that crossed seas, carried armies, built empires, and connected continents. Shipbuilding in the Middle Ages was not an industry in the modern sense. It was a craft shaped by tradition, environment, and hard-earned experience. Knowledge passed not through books, but through hands. Fathers taught sons. Masters trained apprentices. Every ship was a product of memory, intuition, and trial. The process began not at the shore, but deep inland in the forests. Wood was everything. Oak, pine, fir, ash. Each tree had a purpose. Oak formed the backbone of ships, the keel, the ribs, the frames. Pine and fir were lighter, used for planking and masts. Shipbuilders did not simply cut trees at random. They searched for specific shapes. Naturally curved trunks became ribs. Long, straight trees became masts. A poorly chosen tree could doom an entire vessel. Forests were strategic resources. Kingdoms protected them fiercely. Unauthorized logging could bring severe punishment. Naval power began with trees, and medieval rulers understood this well. Once felled, timber was transported slowly by river, by cart, by sheer labor. There was no rush. Wood was often seasoned for years to reduce warping and cracking. Time mattered as much as skill. At the heart of every ship was the keel. The keel was laid first, long and heavy, resting on wooden supports in the shipyard. This single beam defined the ship's length, balance, and destiny. A mistake here could not be corrected later. Around it, the entire vessel would grow. Unlike modern shipbuilding, medieval builders often worked without full plans. The ship existed first in the mind of the master shipwright. Proportions were judged by eye, not numbers. Experience replaced mathematics. This made shipbuilding both flexible and dangerous. No two ships were exactly alike. From the keel rose the ribs, curved wooden frames that gave the ship its shape. These ribs were fitted one by one, fastened with wooden pegs or iron nails hammered by hand. The skeleton emerged slowly, like the exposed bones of some massive sea creature. Only after the ribs stood in place did the hull take form. Planking techniques varied by region. In Northern Europe, clinker construction dominated. Planks overlapped each other like scales, creating flexible but strong hulls. This method, used by Viking shipbuilders and their successors, produced fast, agile vessels ideal for rough seas. In the Mediterranean, carvel construction prevailed. Planks were laid edge to edge, forming a smooth hull. This allowed for larger ships, greater cargo capacity, and later, the mounting of heavy cannons. The choice of technique shaped not just ships but entire naval traditions. Each plank was shaped individually. There were no standardized boards. Shipwrights bent wood using steam, fire, and brute force. Planks were heated, soaked, and slowly forced into position, then secured before they could spring back. Cracks were common. Failure was expected. The sea forgave no shortcuts. To seal the hull, builders used caulking, a mixture of moss, animal hair, or hemp fibers driven into seams, then sealed with pitch or tar. This black, sticky substance protected ships from water and rot. The smell of tar clung to medieval ports, a scent of labor and survival. Above the hull rose the deck, masts, and rigging. Masts were enormous undertakings. A single mast could require one massive tree or several joined together. Raising it involved ropes, pulleys, and dozens of men pulling in unison. One mistake could kill workers instantly. Rigging was its own craft. Ropes were handmade from hemp, twisted and treated for strength. Sails were sewn from heavy cloth, often by specialized workers far from the shipyard. Each sail was tailored to the ship, not interchangeable. Nothing about medieval shipbuilding was fast. A large ship could take months or years to complete. Delays were common. Storms damaged half-finished hulls. Funding ran out. Wars interrupted work. Yet ships were built anyway, because without them, kingdoms were blind and powerless. Labor was brutal. Shipyards were dangerous places. Splintered wood, falling beams, sharp tools, open fires. Injuries were frequent. Death was not rare. There was no safety equipment, no insurance. Workers relied on skill and luck, and yet there was pride. A completed ship was a living thing. Medieval people spoke of ships as if they had personalities. They were blessed before launch, sprinkled with holy water, sometimes given names meant to protect them from the sea's anger. The launch itself was a moment of tension and celebration. The vessel, resting on greased wooden rollers, was guided toward the water. Too fast, and it could shatter. Too slow, and it might stick, cracking under its own weight. When the hull finally touched water, cheers erupted. The ship had taken its first breath. But construction was only the beginning. Ships required constant maintenance. Wood rotted. Worms bored into hulls. Storms tore sails and snapped masts. Crews spent as much time repairing ships as sailing them. A neglected vessel died quickly. Despite these challenges, medieval shipbuilders achieved remarkable feats. They built cogs that carried the trade of northern Europe, galleys that ruled the Mediterranean, longships that terrified coastlines. Later, massive carracks and cogs that crossed open oceans, all without engines, all without blueprints, all with wood, rope, iron, and human judgment. Shipbuilding shaped history silently. Empires expanded not because of castles alone, but because ships carried soldiers, food, and weapons. Trade flourished because ships connected distant markets. Ideas traveled because ships carried people. Disease spread the same way. Every medieval ship was a gamble against the sea, and every shipyard was a place where humans challenged nature with little more than experience and faith. To understand how ships were built in the Middle Ages is to understand how fragile progress once was. One storm, one cracked beam, one misjudged curve could erase years of work. Yet shipbuilders returned to the yard again and again. They measured by eye. They trusted tradition. They shaped forests into vessels, and they sent them into the water, hoping they would return. As ships grew larger and voyages grew longer, medieval shipbuilding evolved under pressure from the sea itself. Experience accumulated not through theory but through failure. Every wreck taught a lesson. Every storm rewrote tradition. Shipwrights learned where hulls split under stress, where water crept in, where masts failed under wind. These lessons were not written down. They were remembered, passed from mouth to ear, from scarred hands to younger ones. A master shipbuilder carried decades of disasters in his mind. Regional differences deepened. Northern seas demanded flexibility. The cold, violent waters of the North Atlantic punished rigid hulls. Clinker-built ships bent with waves instead of breaking against them. Their overlapping planks creaked and shifted, alive under stress. Speed mattered here to outrun storms, to escape enemies, to raid and return quickly. The Mediterranean told a different story. Calmer waters allowed heavier, broader ships. Carvel-built hulls supported greater weight and higher sides. These ships carried bulk cargo, soldiers, and later artillery. They sacrificed speed for endurance and capacity. Geography dictated design. The sea itself became an architect. Shipyards adapted accordingly. Some were permanent, sprawling complexes supported by states or powerful cities. Venice's arsenal was the most famous and early industrial marvel where ships were assembled with astonishing efficiency. Others were temporary, built near forests or rivers, dismantled once construction ended. Wherever wood, water, and labor met, ships could be born. Time governed everything. There were seasons for cutting wood, seasons for building, seasons when work stopped entirely. Winter froze labor. Storms halted progress. Religious calendars interrupted schedules. Shipbuilding existed within a rhythm imposed by nature and belief. Money was a constant constraint. Ships were expensive. Kings struggled to fund fleets. Merchants risked ruin on a single vessel. Loans were taken. Partnerships formed. A ship represented concentrated wealth: wood, labor, iron, time, all bound together and placed at the mercy of the sea. This financial pressure influenced design. Builders balanced ambition with caution. A ship too large risked instability. too small, and it lacked profit or military value. Every decision carried consequences. Medieval shipbuilding was risk management disguised as craftsmanship. Tools remained simple: axes, adzes, chisels, augers, mallets. No power tools, no engines. Strength and precision came from muscle and repetition. Measuring tools existed, but many dimensions were judged visually. Curves were felt, not calculated. This reliance on human perception made each ship unique and unpredictable. Mistakes were irreversible. Once planks were fixed, removing them risked weakening the hull. Once the keel was set, errors echoed through the entire structure. Shipbuilders worked slowly because speed punished carelessness. Patience was not a virtue, it was survival. Labor organization reflected this reality. Shipyards were hierarchical. The master shipwright held authority close to absolute. His word determined cuts, shapes, corrections. Beneath him, skilled craftsmen specialized in tasks. Hull builders, caulkers, rope makers, sail makers. Unskilled laborers carried, hauled, and endured. Injuries were common. Hands were crushed. Limbs were sliced. Falls from masts were fatal. There were no healers specialized for industrial accidents. Pain was accepted as part of work. To build ships was to risk the body for the sea. Yet for many, shipbuilding offered opportunity. Ports were centers of movement and money. Skilled shipwrights were valued, sometimes protected by law, sometimes recruited aggressively by rival cities. Knowledge was power. To lose experienced builders was to weaken a fleet. Secrecy mattered. Certain techniques were guarded carefully. The exact shape of a hull, the treatment of timber, the proportions of masts. These were strategic assets. Espionage existed even here. Cities attempted to steal shipbuilding knowledge as eagerly as military plans. Religion remained ever present. Ships were blessed repeatedly during construction, at launch, before voyages. Saints were invoked for protection. Carvings and symbols were embedded into hulls. Faith filled the gaps where certainty failed. No shipbuilder truly believed skill alone could defeat the sea, and the sea demanded payment. Ships were lost constantly. Storms wrecked fleets. Navigation errors grounded vessels. Worms hollowed hulls from within. The lifespan of a medieval ship was often short. Few survived more than a couple of decades without extensive rebuilding. This impermanence shaped mindset. Shipbuilders did not chase perfection. They chased adequacy. A ship needed to be good enough, strong enough, flexible enough, seaworthy enough to complete its purpose. Beyond that, the sea would decide. And still, they built, despite loss, despite danger, despite uncertainty, because ships were not optional. Without ships, trade collapsed, armies starved, cities withered, power shrank. Medieval civilization floated on wooden hulls more fragile than its ambitions. Each new ship represented defiance, a statement that humans could cut forests, bend timber, bind it with iron and rope, and send it across an indifferent ocean, not with certainty, not with control, but with hope. And hope, in the Middle Ages, was often all that stood between progress and silence. By the late Middle Ages, shipbuilding stood at the edge of transformation. The craft remained rooted in tradition, but pressure from exploration, warfare, and expanding trade began to stretch its limits. Ships were asked to go farther, carry more, and survive longer than ever before. This pressure changed priorities. Earlier medieval ships hugged coastlines. They sailed from landmark to landmark, rarely losing sight of land. Navigation relied on memory, stars, and experience. But as ambition grew, so did distance. Longer voyages demanded sturdier hulls, higher sides, deeper holds, and more reliable rigging. Shipbuilders responded not with sudden innovation, but with accumulation. Hull designs grew broader to increase stability. Keels deepened to improve tracking in open water. Decks became more enclosed, offering protection from waves and weather. These changes were subtle, layered slowly over generations. Each one tested not in theory, but in storms. Failure remained the primary teacher. When ships capsized, builders adjusted proportions. When hulls split, planking methods changed. When masts snapped, rigging was reinforced. Every improvement carried the memory of loss behind it. This process produced new ship types. Cogs dominated northern trade, wide-bodied, single-masted vessels capable of carrying heavy cargo. Their high sides made them defensible against pirates. In the Mediterranean, galleys remained vital, long, narrow, powered by oars and sail, designed for speed and maneuverability in war. Then came the hybrids. As trade routes expanded and warfare evolved, shipbuilders blended traditions. Northern hulls met southern rigging. Square sails were joined by lateen sails, allowing ships to sail closer to the wind. These combinations made vessels more versatile and more complex. Complexity increased risk. More rigging meant more failure points. More weight strained hulls. More sails required more skilled crews. A medieval ship was a balance of competing demands: speed versus strength, cargo versus stability, cost versus durability. Shipbuilders walked this line carefully. They did not innovate recklessly. Too much change invited disaster. Every deviation from tradition required confidence backed by experience. Radical designs were rare. Evolution was safer than revolution. This caution shaped medieval maritime expansion. When European ships finally crossed open oceans in the late medieval and early modern periods, they did so on foundations built slowly over centuries. The so-called Age of Discovery was not born overnight. It was constructed plank by plank in anonymous shipyards by craftsmen who would never sail beyond their own coasts. Their work outlived them. Shipbuilders rarely traveled. They built vessels for others to risk their lives upon. Merchants, soldiers, explorers, these were the ones remembered by history. The men who shaped the hulls remained largely invisible, their names lost, their fingerprints erased by salt and time. Yet their influence was absolute. Without them, no voyages happened, no empires expanded, no trade networks formed. The sea did not care about ambition, only preparation, and preparation was everything. Before a ship ever touched water, it had already consumed years of labor. Trees felled decades earlier. Rope spun months before. Sails stitched in distant workshops. Iron forged in inland smithies. A ship represented coordination across entire regions. Medieval logistics were slow, fragile, and astonishingly effective. This interconnectedness made shipbuilding political. States intervened directly. Kings issued orders for ships. Cities regulated yards. Naval contracts reshaped economies. During war, shipyards became strategic targets. Burning an enemy's ships in port could cripple them without a single battle at sea. Shipbuilders found themselves caught between power and necessity. They worked for whoever paid. Loyalty mattered less than survival. Skilled craftsmen were pressured, relocated, sometimes forced into service. Knowledge became leverage. To build ships was to serve power, whether willingly or not. Despite this, pride endured. A well-built ship was a statement. It reflected mastery over material and method. Shipbuilders judged each other harshly. Reputation mattered. A ship that leaked or failed damaged not just owners, but builders. Shame lingered longer than profit. This professional identity created continuity. Even as technology advanced, medieval shipbuilding remained recognizably human. Tools changed slowly. Hands still guided blades. Eyes still judged curves. Experience still outweighed instruction. The sea remained unpredictable, and humility remained necessary. By the end of the Middle Ages, ships stood larger, stronger, and more capable than ever before. But they were still wooden, still vulnerable, still mortal. And the sea had not changed. Storms still crushed hulls. Navigation errors still killed crews. Distance still magnified mistakes. Progress had extended reach, not eliminated danger. This balance defined medieval shipbuilding. It was never about conquering the sea. It was about surviving it long enough to matter. Every medieval ship was a compromise between what humans wanted and what nature allowed. Builders knew this. Sailors felt it. Rulers ignored it until ships failed, and when they did, forests had to be cut again. New keels laid, new ribs raised, new hulls sealed. The cycle never stopped. To understand how ships were built in the Middle Ages is to understand patience under pressure, craft without certainty, skill without guarantees, faith placed not in perfection, but in adequacy. The sea demanded respect, not confidence. And medieval shipbuilders gave it exactly that, one plank at a time.